Hi, everybody. David Noor back with you for another episode of the Service Council's inService podcast series. We're delighted you're here. I'm joined today by Erik Anderson of Hologic. Hello, Erik.
Hey, Noor, how you doing?
Doing great.
First time caller here, long time listener.
That's awesome. It's great to have you as a guest. You've been behind the scenes and I think watching previous episodes. So delighted you're here. For our audience, we're live on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter, and it's going to be a great conversation today, really focused on how do we gain a broader visibility for the service organization, the service leadership, with that seat at the table, whether that's a leadership table, whether that's a board table, whether that's an industry table. We all believe that field service, customer experience can and should have a much bigger value creation impact in the business. And Erik's going to be a great guest to talk about that as you learn more. So, Erik, if we could, why don't we start with your background? If you could kindly start with personally, professionally, kind of where you've been, what you've done, and how you've arrived here, that'd be a great way to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Midwest guy. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Graduated with a marketing degree from Iowa State University, and spent a few years in recruiting and the banking and finance world, and got my in healthcare about, call it 12 or 13 years ago, with a great company called Stryker, and in sales, and got to do some things in upstream and downstream marketing and then sales leadership. And I went to a small med tech company in oncology, and then landed at Hologic about coming up on 8 years ago, where I've had a number of roles here at Hologic in sales leadership. I did run one of our businesses, and led the divestiture of that business as well, our medical aesthetics business, and then landed back at Hologic in service. So I've been in service now for a little over a couple years, and kind of lead our service business here. So it's been a heck of a ride. Love healthcare, and have certainly been extremely blessed and humbled to work at Hologic.
Love that journey because it's not a traditional one. What attracted you to service from traditionally a sales kind of marketing background?
Yeah, I think for me, I go back to when I was a sales rep, and I still have his number in my phone. His name was John Reitler. He was my service engineer at some of my big accounts when I was a sales rep. So even early on, as a young rep that doesn't know that I'm just so focused on learning the products, hitting my quota, getting in front of customers, I saw the value that the service engineers and the service team and the support team brings. And at every step of my journey along the way, including my last role prior to service, running the aesthetics business called Cynosure, I mean, I earmarked on my calendar the global service meeting that we had, and our head of service was a key leader on that team. We had in that industry, we were the largest service organization as well, doing over 70 million in revenue, and had 60 some field engineers just in the US domestically here. So it's been a key focus for me. So it came natural. I had so much respect and faith in this business and everything that they stand for. It kind of came natural, and I was humbled and honored to dive in, and obviously with a lot to learn and still learning every day.
So I'm always curious whether that's nature or nurture. Were you genuinely curious and you proactively engaged the service organization, or do you believe the service organization was intentional in making sure not just sales, but other parts of the organization saw and experienced the value that they added?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think I give credit to. I didn't seek it out. I didn't know. I was so focused on the divestiture of that business, and just kind of coming up for a little breather after we handed it over to private equity, and I exited there. It's our executive leaders, our CEO and our CFO had been looking at Hologic and kind of looking at the journey that they had been on. I joined maybe a little less than a year after our CEO, Steve McMillan, who I was able to overlap with, worked under at Stryker as well, which is one of the big attractions to me to come to Hologic. And they were looking at the service business and really looking at our infrastructure as a company, and approached me about this opportunity. So a lot of trust there, and again, a huge honor. So it was one of those deals where I wish I could say I thought about it and sought it out and said, hey, we could do this, but I really didn't. I didn't come up with any of it. I was I was asked if I'd be interested, which of course, absolutely. And, we've been attacking this thing for a couple of years now.
That's fantastic. For our audience who may not know as much about Hologic, can you talk a little about the company, of what do you guys do, the market you serve, and also a little about your service organization?
Yeah, so we're a medical technology company, really uniquely focused, Nor, in women's healthcare. And we have clinically differentiated, market-leading products in each of our divisions. So we've got 3 divisions: diagnostics, breast health, and our surgical division. So our purpose as a company is to enable healthier lives everywhere, every day. Our passion is to become global champions for women's health. And, we're leaders in breast cancer and cervical cancer detection. And you think about our company, we're relatively young, at just over 30 years old. And you could say there's no company has done more in the space of cervical and breast cancer than Hologic. We're publicly traded, HOLX, on the NASDAQ, fiscal 21 numbers north of $5 billion in revenue, close to 6,500 global employees. And then when you look at the service business, the service portion of that, SureCare is our brand, the SureCare service. We support north of 600 million in revenue. We're over 1,200 people strong, tens of thousands of assets in the field, and a really, really, really strong team, an award-winning team. 9 years in a row, IMV top service and customer experience in mammography. Similarly, 3 years in a row, same award in molecular diagnostics service. So it's a really strong team, and we're really proud of what we do.
How are you measured?
I mean, I think the typical things, right? You look at our performance internally, our internal scorecards. When you look at what we're doing in revenue and what we're driving to margin and profit, but ultimately it is to the customers. Our whole theme is patient care uninterrupted. So how do our customers think we're doing? Obviously, with the awards we win, we're very strong with CSAT and NPS and all those things that we measure, that every service organization measures. We take it very, very. I'm just coming off a QBR that we did last week, and we spend a lot of time diving into those numbers and what's driving them, and are we getting better? Are we staying flat? Or are we getting worse? And if we're getting worse, what are we doing about it? So I think we're really kind of like a traditional service org. All those things going back to the customer and what's the impact of the customer and the patients they serve. That's what we're measuring.
Love that. One of the things that I coach a lot of leaders to think about, particularly in positions of power and influence, is really the brand. What are you doing to articulate a consistent brand and cascade that to the organization? And then your culture. So how would you describe the service organization brand that you lead?
Yeah. So it's interesting, SureCare is the brand, and going back to our purpose and passion as Hologic, our promise at Hologic is to bring the science of sure. That's our registered trademark, the science of sure, to life. And that's through product quality, clinical differentiation, customer relationships, and our team's talent and engagement, kind of combining those 4 things. So we did, we kind of had this brand kind of sitting on the shelf a little bit, SureCare, and we've really kudos to some leaders that we brought in that really created a global brand council, where we had people from all over, for whether it's Asia or Europe, and certainly here in the U.S., really did an intensive voice of the customer, internal voice of the customer with folks around the organization. And the recurring themes and the stories were so inspiring on how our customers view our team as an extension of their staff. They can't imagine not having them there. All that stuff, that's really where the SureCare brand and the tagline, patient care uninterrupted, have kind of been the brand. And then when you think about our culture, our teams they're incredible. They take so much responsibility and care for our customers and for one another. And we've seen it time and time again and throughout the pandemic, of how our teams not only are there for our customers, but there for each other too, and having each other's backs. We got to see up close and personal when you go through something like COVID, rummaging through a workforce that never left the front lines. So that's really, but fundamentally, Nor, people, performance, culture. Those are kind of 3 things that myself and my leaders think about when we think about this organization, where we're focused on.
That's great. John Carroll's, and for our audience, would encourage you to jump in. John Carroll sharing According to research done by the Service Council, the presence of executive management and service executive oversight yields the greatest performance in key operating and customer metrics. Organizations measuring customer sat for more than 5 years earn just a greater net promoter score. You guys do net promoter score, and how does that show up?
We do. It shows up really well for us. We're in the, depending on the division that we're looking at, it's in the 85 to 90 range, which is really good. And it's something that I take zero credit for. It was here when I got here, and we're continuing to grow that, build on that. But we see it as, it's very good when you benchmark it against others. But for us, it's table stakes. Our customers deserve that. They pay for that. And that's how we want to show up. So it's certainly, but when you look around even at the division presidents, and it's not just the service org, they put up things like they want to make sure our NPS and CSAT scores are at a goal for the year. So it's all of us in it together. And that's the magic of it, right? When you have a customer focused organization, the rest of you take care of that customer and you find ways to continue to do it better and more efficient. You win in every category.
Talk about your 2021 mantra, service swagger, and other things you're doing to really build that supportive culture, that customer-centric culture that you talked about.
Yeah, the little hashtag service swagger. So going back to when I first came in and just was kind of getting the lay of the land, and you have to think of Hologic was, we had never really integrated ourselves. We had grown tremendously. I talked about how young the company is. We'd grown through some big M&A activity and a lot of silos, a lot of big silos and fences and brick walls kind of built up. And then as I listened to some of the service leaders, some that had been with the company a long time, very talented, still with us, there was kind of this, woe is us. We're treated like a cost center. Our P&L can be a dumping ground at times, and finance runs our business. And I kind of need to, it was like, we need a little reminder of who we are, who we represent, and all the unsung heroes out there, and kind of the cornerstone. Our CEO has referred to us publicly on earnings calls as the cornerstone of the relationships with our customers. So it's kind of like a little shot in the arm. Like, let's have some flair, some moxie, some swagger. And it kind of stuck. It was something that I said, but I've watched people run with it. I see even our sales force working so in close partnership with our service team, put the hashtag service swagger out there. So that's kind of been the mantra. It's been a great for us culturally. And then I think going back to having that executive presence, to John's point, having that executive presence at the table where I can represent some of that swagger and represent what the team's been doing and building and thinking about.
Well, one of the key challenges that I hear from executives that I talk to is twofold, specifically to build on that culture and talent. Erik, one is attracting and retaining great talent. That's always a challenge, seems to have really exacerbated during this pandemic. The second one is really leading, multi-generational teams, right? So the old school, tried and true service technicians who just kind of do things their way, reliable, been in the business for a long time. And then the fresh blood, the new thinking, the new perspective that you need in every organization to kind of infuse energy and excitement. Talk about how you address those, both the attracting of great talent, but also managing a diverse kind of workforce.
Yeah, great question, and I think it's something everybody's dealing with. One of the things, paramount and foundational for us. When we got together for the first time last August in Chicago as a total global service organization. Again, those silos were wiped out, and people say, what's the vision? Where are we going? And I laid it out there and we've run with this, and it's to be the most admired service organization in all of healthcare. Now, that's not easy, but it's something that we feel is achievable. It's not going to happen overnight. And part of that, what does that look like? It's a destination for talent. So to your question, we absolutely want to be that destination for talent. We want the new blood. We want the, whether it's, new field engineers, as well as folks on the operational side and the supply chain side, folks coming in. We have, I think the Hologic brand has escalated over the last several years with a lot of things we've been doing publicly for humanity, like some of the titles of this podcast is. So we want that talent. And then you think of the some of the legacy talent is so critical as well. I mean, I look at some of the folks that have been here. I was out in the field last month and was with a field service leader that's been here for 30 years. He looks younger than me, so you wouldn't know it. But, the ideas and the energy and the passion as well. So you start to invest in that. You bring those folks together, of some of the folks we've been able to promote internally, some folks we've brought from outside the organization, and then that core legacy, some of the tribal knowledge. That's the magic. So it's really been how do we develop, how do we harness our great talent and passion that we have, and then certainly there's some decisions to make too, especially when it comes to the leadership side of things, on who are the folks that want to be a part of this, that want to work with maniacal urgency to transform this and drive us to new levels and drive us to that best in class, most admired. And we've definitely have had to make some moves too on some folks that maybe weren't going to make that turn and just couldn't quite get there, couldn't quite let go of the this is how we've always done it mentality.
So again, love John's comment. Service really is humanity, and a lot of what you're talking about, just references that enormously. So build on that a second, Erik. You and I talked about, every organization goes through different maturity levels, and at some point, good people, good intentions are just not going to be a right fit. How have you found the best way to, as humanely as possible, help them move on or find other opportunities, either within the organization or somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's building a leadership team that's willing to coach and willing to have some of those tough conversations. And some of those conversations may look like, hey, this exact spot for you isn't working out. This isn't the spot. So let's look for a landing place, whether it's within the organization or outside of it, and figure out how to do that in the best way possible. I mean, ultimately, you want people to leave your organization as a proud alumni of Hologic. And I think we've been able to do that. In a lot of cases, it doesn't always work out that way, unfortunately, but it is what it is. But yeah, I think it's being able to really look as a leader and really challenging our leaders, whether it's our frontline leaders or our directors or our vice presidents, to really build that championship team. And what does a championship? I'm a pretty simpleton when it comes to sports analogies. And what are you doing? Are you building? Are you developing your great team? Are you out there? Are you recruiting? Are you trading? And sometimes that means you're trading and you're drafting and you're cutting some of the players that you don't see to be able to take the team to the next level and accomplish the goals you want to accomplish.
Understood. So in this episode, we're talking about service leaders earning a seat at that executive level. Can you describe what that means to you? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's something that is a tremendous amount of pride and responsibility for me when I think about the large service organization that I am representing at that table. And that table, it's not a courtesy seat. Just because we're a big business with a lot of revenue and a lot of people, that doesn't automatically earn you a seat, even though people know how important the service business is, and for reasons we already talked about. I think for me, it means collaboration. I earn that seat every day. I got to represent the team. I got to have the trust and respect from my team that I'm representing us well. But to me, it's about collaboration, wiping out the silos. You think of that executive table and who I sit with there, and the importance of my relationship with the finance team is so critical, with the CIO and the IT organization, with operations, with supply chain, with manufacturing, and the quality organization has been huge. The HR organization, massive. So you think of all those, that's a lot to balance and represent us well, and understand also what others are doing and what others are driving and how we fit into that. And then of course the division presidents that ultimately I'm accountable to. I see them as, other bosses for me, in terms of we have to build an organization that's nimble and scalable and flexible to where those businesses are going in the future via acquisition, new models, and obviously partnered really tightly with their respective sales and marketing, commercial, and R&D teams, of course, as well.
We got some great questions coming in. Encourage our audience to continue jumping. Willem wants to know, why can services not be seen as just a division in the IR reporting?
Yeah, I think some companies have done that. Some, I think with us, it almost creates an unnecessary silo. where we're because we look at the numbers, we look at our numbers. I can do that with my team and really build up a global P&L and report card and scorecard. But ultimately, we're gonna adapt to how Hologic looks at how Hologic's reporting to the street and how where that headcount sits, where the investments sit with the leaders that I just talked about, those division presidents. I want to make sure that I am accretive and a good thing on their P&L and in their scorecards and how they're looking at their business. What are we doing to support the commercial growth as well as the service growth, certainly, and then driving an efficient operation, driving leverage and impact to the bottom line.
I tend to agree with Chris, who says, well said, earning that seat at the table every day. I couldn't agree more. And I've always believed it's less about you. It's more about how others are better off because of you. And it sounds like that's a big part of your philosophy as well. We have another question from Johan, who I guess wants to know, do you see a place and acceleration of the chief service officer?
I think as I look at this, as I've studied this, and certainly going back to my original comment, listening to podcasts like yours and John's and following so many organizations and networking with service leaders, companies have their own, the chief service officer. Great. It's a title. I just don't think of it that way when I think of where Hologic's at right now in our journey. I can just speak to us, and I feel extremely heard. I feel invested in for my team. And, I feel like that seat at the table, Chris, great comment. I have to earn that every day. I got to earn the respect and trust through performance and how I show up at that table and how my teams show up throughout the organization, how we effectively evangelize all the things we're doing and a lot of the things that take investment and take time. Some of the things we've had to do just to wipe out legacy processes and really that are just our end-to-end process mapping and certain mechanisms that we have as an organization to fix that foundation so that the technology we invest in and other things that are kind of a little more cool and flashy when you think about things like AI for service, if you don't have the right foundation in place, it's not going to do much. So I think for us, it's been showing up every day as, I really want us to be known as the best partner across Hologic in a matrix organization like we are. Really showing up as the best partner every day across functions to all different teams.
So talk about your journey, and specifically, Erik, I'm a big believer that we're all products of the advice we take. As you know, Service Council is comprised of some phenomenal global field service, customer experience leaders. What advice do you have for them to gain more awareness for the value that service brings and really help their colleagues get beyond intellectually understanding that service is important and really, again, helping them earn that same seat at that executive table?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, it's really owning the narrative and being able to paint a clear picture, because service leaders in general can get caught in the weeds because you're so focused, you're so close to the action, you're thinking about the operating mechanisms and the trunk stock inventory, things like that, where take it up a notch, be able to say, hey, here's where we are on our journey. This is where we want to go. You got to be able to paint the picture of the future and what it's going to drive. And for me, it was painting a picture too of, hey, what we're doing right now, like the scores show up well, the customer, we're doing great, NPS, CSAT, but it's not sustainable in terms of how we're doing it, the heroics that we're having to do to get there. So to me, I was able to show like, hey, we are laggards in certain areas compared to the rest of the industry or where the industry is going. So it's being able to really articulate the story of here's where we've been, here's where we are, here's what we're doing, and here's where we're going. And that you can gain acceptance and trust and confidence and investment in the things you want to do. Otherwise, if it's just a moaning session about if this and if we don't have enough people, this is what will happen, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to get there slowly. So I think it's really for all of us and as leaders out there, really looking at yourselves on where you're at and articulating that clear vision of where you need to go and why you need to go there. And these are the steps you need to take to get there.
Yeah, visionary storytelling consistently becomes, I believe, a leadership differentiator. And for you to be able to articulate, as you said, here's where we're going, here's how we're going to get there, not only makes the story believable, but they want to believe in you as you start to execute and really deliver on that vision. I had breakfast this morning with you're going to like this, a chief information officer, a CIO, who doesn't come from a technology background. And the reason, and by the way, it's a $2 billion organization. The reason he's in that role is because he can speak business. And increasingly, other, the business colleagues are looking for that business conversation, and technology as an enabler. Sounds like you're doing the same thing. You're speaking business with service as an enabler of those patient outcomes.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I think it's been my career, right? When I mentioned all the different, I'm no one's tapping me as an expert consultant on any specific industry. The organizations I've come into, sometimes it's been the building's on fire. Let's calm this down. Let's get some stability. Let's figure out what we need to do with the leadership team. All those things. I think for me, I'm never, even in a group of not super smart people, I'm still not the smartest one in the room, but I am good at surrounding myself with people far smarter than me. And I think that's what I've been able to do here in service, where I'm listening. To me, it's listening, it's figuring out who are the leaders, who are the folks that are absolute beasts. Some of the folks that we have on our team, a few of the folks that report directly to me, I learn from them every time we talk and dive into where we could go. So to me, it's then being able to take some of the service speak, if you will, that many people in our industry are so fluent in, and really be able to translate that into business speak at that leadership table.
For our audience, again, we're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. Would encourage you to jump in. We got another great question from Joe. How have you leveraged innovation in growing services?
Yeah, massively. I mean, it's a huge for us. It's the mantra for us right now is deliver today. Continue to deliver today, hit what we need to hit today to deliver for our businesses and for our customers, while maintaining a maniacal urgency on tomorrow. And so for us, that innovation runs deep there. And it goes from whether it's our digital transformation, our technology roadmap, to where we can get more flexible and nimble with new service offerings. And then also, I think a big piece of this is really partnering at the core at the new product development, and going back to having a seat at the table. If service doesn't have a massive seat and ability to have input on new product development and designing for service, then we're setting ourselves up for issues years down the road. So I think when I think of innovation, I think of those two things together, thinking about all the way on the front end when we're designing something to, hey, we've got this massive install base. What are the areas that we invest in to make it easier for our customers to do business with us, with things like self-service and customer portal and AI and all those different things.
Is that serviceability at the front end of the design and manufacturing and all that, has that been a particularly challenging conversation? Talk a little about that dynamic of, we've got engineers, we've got designers, we've got people that do all kinds of product research, and they all have opinions. How have you been able to infuse? Listen, we also have to be able to service these, and parts and availability and access for the field technicians and remote access and self-service. So how are you infusing those in that conversation?
Yeah, it hasn't been easy, and it's no one's fault. I think, when you build, you have an R&D organization, commercial org, that's, you're building your strat plans, and it's all about that next launch of what's coming. You look at things in the future and wanting to keep to those dates. And that can be the tough part, where a service doesn't get in the conversation early enough. Some things can get pushed to the back of the line, if you will, and which again means, hey, we'll deal with that when it happens, versus robust design allowing for things to be, you think of the truck rolls and the avoidance of dispatch if we're designing for things to be done remotely, and all of that piece of it. Certainly we're in X-rays and big labs, things are going to break. We're naturally going to need field engineers to go out and fix, but what are the things we can do remotely and design for that remote services? I don't think, and this is a lot of companies. There's a lot of products we have out there where you can say, well, this clearly wasn't designed with service top of mind. And so again, having that seat, being able to lay it out clearly on what to do and why we're doing it. And I've watched that, and it's really kudos to the teams on the marketing side, on the upstream marketing side, on the new product design side, inviting service, where we're there and able to give some really lively lively discussion points to build some rich discussion and have people pause on certain things that could end up costing us and the customers in the future.
I've always believed it's very difficult to push a rope. What you really want to do is try to create gravity or pull
Yeah.
into the design, into the engineering, into, hey, let's make sure service also sees what we've developed or designed or we're thinking of. And as you said, early on in the process. Wilhelm has a follow-up question. Are you also servicing non-Hologic brands?
We are not. It's certainly when we think of new business models, and it's my job to think about a strat plan to look at what other areas could be. We're not right now. I think we have enough on our plate. We've had some recent acquisitions, integrating those, really building out. I think we got to have so much focus on our core processes and who we are, and building out the Hologic playbook and continuing to grow that, versus thinking about how we would service, do the multi-vendor service agreements, because they can look good, they can sound good, you can think of, hey, we're already in these places, this could be some more top line revenue. And also it comes at a higher cost with that as well. So really balancing all that and thinking, hey, what should we be focused on for ourselves as a company and where we're going? So as I think about right now, that doesn't take up a ton of my mind share versus what's in front of us, and what there's so much that we can do over the next week, over the next 6 months, and certainly over the next several years to really grow to this most admired state that we're going after.
You talked about, again, service centricity in the design, kind of upfront, obviously managing the present and the current install base. What's your perspective? What's your opinion on preventive maintenance, and whether using technology or using, analytics or whatever we can, or IoT devices, to kind of get ahead of when that device could potentially fail in that lab, in that hospital, in that women's health center?
Yeah, no, we're all over that. So we do think about that constantly. And, our focus on PMs has been huge. We've had a group going back to harnessing great leaders that have so much to say and so many ideas, going back to that seat at the table, allowing the people closest to the customer, closest to the business, being able to help us there. We've had a full PM revamp project that's in full swing right now. But I think our whole mindset is to move to more predictive. I think our customers want that. We want that. And going back to what are the things we can drive with quality and with reliability of our products, reducing the number of unscheduled service visits is a huge thing for us. And even when we say, hey, if on average we're visiting this lab or imaging center 5 times per year unscheduled beyond the preventive maintenance, why are we going there? What's going on? How can we get more predictive with this? How can we bundle this in with a PM to prevent this? Those types of things where we're looking at, the classic first time fix rates, and then the second call avoidance. How often are we having to go back with that same piece of equipment less than 30 days later? That's a problem. What's going on? And I think things like going back to innovation and technology, things like AI and the IoT, the sensing, there's so many things we can measure. We're getting after that right now, and excited about the progress we're seeing every quarter.
For our audience, if you just joined us late, you're listening to Erik Anderson, is president of the global sales organization at Hologic, and we're talking about service leaders earning really a seat at that executive table. Wolfgang has got a follow-up question. To drive service innovation, you need top-level support. What level do you propose? Maybe it's essential to be part of the top-level management to drive things, and most important, to have the budget to do so. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, critical. I think some of the things I've learned. So I'm blessed because I sit in some of these. I was on a panel with a number of service leaders, chief service officers, and across multiple industries. And kind of the 2 key themes that came up were that voice at the table, and what's so critical now is the partnership with the CIO. You just talked about the CIO you had breakfast with this morning. And to get those investments. So is the company willing to not just listen and have you at the table, or are they willing to invest? And with those investments, it's obviously a lot with technology. Is the CIO really bought in, knowing that what's on their plate every day? And you think about just cybersecurity alone. If I'm sitting in the CFO's shoes, CIO's shoes, that's a huge issue for, I guess, the CEO and the CFO too. So for Hologic right now, I actually sit on I report to our CFO, who was essentially the brains behind creating this global service initiative, which turned into the global service organization. And the CIO sits right there with me. So I consider him, one of my best buddies at work and a partner. And so does my team with his organization. So I think with that, in having that seat at the table and being able to articulate the right story and hey, here's what the investment's going to take, here's the time, this will be the outcome, clearly articulating the ROI, then you can get that investment. And we've been able to do that, but we've been able to do it as a team. It certainly hasn't been me on my own kind of, storming up the hill with the service flag. It hasn't felt like that for me because I've had so many folks around, including our CFO and our CEO, that have, kind of created this seat and have listened and have invested.
I was going to say, I don't see nearly enough gray hairs for reporting up to a CFO. So I want to know what your secret is. How do you get budgets? How do you go ask for an investment that you found it to? I mean, do they intuitively get it that if Erik comes and you've built a relationship with him, that if he's asking for investment, it's gonna what's the ROI on your service investment request?
Yeah, I think for me, again, it's articulating that story and being really smart too about, you think of the number of technology companies and consultants and people that hit you up at this level, and my team on this is what we have. So really being able to funnel that and say, hey, what's the most important? And again, going back to me, listening to the front line. I want to know, is this going to impact our frontline leaders and the field engineers? Just in the US alone, we're over 550. So thinking about that and what that impact is, because that's really, our strength is there. We got great people that do a phenomenal job. So go back to your question with the CFO. It's really being able to articulate, tell the story, and stay ahead and be able to. I can't, with someone like that, you're not going to be able to just show a PowerPoint on a Friday one-on-one call and say, this is what I'm thinking. It's building that over time, getting the right pieces in place from an ROI standpoint. And some of it is the cost avoidance too for us. It's not just the simple, hey, we invest in this is the top line impact we'll see. If we can invest in something where we're not having to hire, 10 more field engineers for every X amount of Panthers or gantries that we place, that's tremendous leverage. That's cost avoidance for the business because we're running a more efficient business. We're not eating up all of our capacity and utilization of our folks. So it's kind of twofold there, Nor.
I have a CFO friend who over lunch we're talking about, he brought up, we've got above the line projects and below the line projects. So I got really curious and I said, well, what does that mean? He said, that the business unit has P&L leaders who are asking for investments, who've done their due diligence and have got a compelling business case and it's believable, are above the line. Those are the ones we tend to prioritize and invest in. The ones that are still haven't thought of, how will this impact? What does this look like? And are not, that the story isn't fully baked in essence, are below the line. So I thought that was interesting. John Carroll's got a great comment. According to Service Leaders Agenda Survey, top areas for the focus in the next 5 years: innovation, expansion of service portfolio, technology exploration. Are those same with your top three?
100%. Yep, they are.
It's again, for our audience, if you haven't looked into the Service Council research, they do some great, from voice of the field service technician to this now Service Leaders Agenda. They've got some great research I would encourage you to jump in and look into. Wilhelm wants to make sure, by the way, Wilhelm wants to make sure he gets his money's worth out of this episode. So love the questions. Keep them coming. Does product as a service is already part of your service portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And we're thinking of, just even sitting last week in some of the meetings, thinking of, X as a service and where we can go and what are other things we can offer. But certainly when we look at some of the things we're building now, where what can we add with 24-hour remote monitoring, predictive analytics, all those things that can add on to the current products that we offer are kind of critical on our journey. So there's a lot going back to your above the line, below the line. I think it's a great point. I think as we've started to get investment and built some of that swagger and have talent speaking up, it's almost, I was last week talking to a team where it's almost like I feel like an R&D organization that has a lot of ideas, a lot of things, a lot of stuff we could prioritize. And it's this funnel now where we have to decide, hey, we don't have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited budget. What are the key things that are going to drive the needle for both today and tomorrow and in the next 5 years as we transform this business and really focus in on what are those things we need to do and do them well.
You're going to love this or it's going to make you cringe. I talked to an executive recently who said, with a straight face, I said, well, tell me about your priorities. And he says, we got 69 priorities. And I'm like, respectfully, you have no priorities, because it's just because you can doesn't mean you should. So are you out of curiosity, are you running a full P&L? I mean, are you responsible for service revenue as well as the cost?
So we, our teams absolutely act like that, think like that, and look at the P&L like that. As the question earlier talked about a separate P&L, the respective service business P&Ls go into the businesses. So I talked about those 3 businesses: breast health, diagnostics, surgical, and then the international business. So for us, we're able to pull service out and look at it holistically, and then how that rolls into those. So we're in strat plan season right now. I have a strat deck for service that's consistent, which is a beautiful thing. It's consistent across the board in what we're driving as a service organization, but the numbers and the actual P&Ls dating out to 27 are they look at it within those businesses and how it impacts that P&L. So to me, it's all about how are we reporting? How do the businesses look at it and see their results every day when we get the numbers every morning? And what are we doing to drive top and bottom line there? So our team, certainly, even our service team, we look at that top line revenue. We take tremendous pride. We had our head of sales for service was a key member of our meeting last week, gave a great presentation. So there's a shared responsibility. My team's goals, my goals include top line revenue. And then on top of that too, we look at ways for how can our service organization drive product revenue, which doesn't hit the service P&L, but we're out there, we're in front of the folks, and you have a newer sales rep or even a legacy sales rep working tightly with their field service engineer. And we actually incentivize that for our engineers to drive new product sales. And we've seen a lot of success with that, and just so proud of the leaders to be able to drive that. When you look at again, going back to the capacity gains of our teams and being able to have the teams not only do their day job and the heroic efforts to get those types of CSAT and NPS scores, but also be able to talk to the customers about new products or new software and things they should have. It's resulted in, tens of millions of dollars in top line product revenue, which is really cool to see.
No, that's great. So we talked about the revenue side. Johan is asking an interesting question. Do you have full horizontal clarity on end-to-end service cost by service lines? If so, how do you do that?
Not quite there yet, but closer every day. I think one of the areas for us right now is really what we've really gotten after the last 2 years is the service supply chain. And that's something that, the end-to-end of us being able to forecast for spare parts. And in simple terms, Nor, can we get the right part to the right place at the right time and at the right quality as well? And with FedEx and some other things, just kind of how we are a little bit still some legacy with some of the stuff that gets tossed over the fence to, for instance, our operations team. We'd love to have more visibility and more automation there. But for the most part, to answer the question, that's the goal. That's how we're trying to look at the business. We don't really, there are certain things that still hit the service P&L that maybe we can't control. So what we do is kind of carve that out and do a service only P&L. Hey, this is the stuff we control every day. And are we getting better and really measuring that?
For our audience, if you haven't had a chance to check out Zerobased costing, and Illinois Toolworks and several really world-class organizations look at their budgets and the cost from a zero-based every year. And it's a fascinating accountability measure for where are we investing, where are we spending. Let's be intentional about really controlling that. I want to switch gears.
Real quick on that too.
Please.
The other thing that we measure that I really like is service costs as a percentage of total revenue.
Right.
So really looking at that, and that tells a story too on, hey, the business is growing, the install base is growing. here's our service costs, not just looking at against the service revenue, but how are we doing against the whole business. And that's something that I've learned, and one of our leaders, Ty Scott, has done a phenomenal job measuring that in our diagnostics business. We've really taken that full course now across the globe.
And that's an example of beyond opinions and perspectives and intuitions, data-driven decision-making that shows a level of professional maturity that I think more executives and boards are going to look for. So don't just tell me, and I get intellectually that service is important. Show me as a percentage of the revenue, and by the way, where are we investing? How are we investing? How do we remain world-class in kind of what we do and how we do it? But you brought up patient care uninterrupted. You brought up really a service of shore to life. And it reminds me that Service Council deeply believes in this, as John mentioned, service is humanity. Hologic also seems to be really passionate about women's health. Share your perspective on the public health leadership and why it's so critical for Hologic as a company, but also the service organization to be on that front line, to really lead and not kind of follow and kind of be a noise in the background, if you will.
Yeah, no, and the two go hand in hand. I think there's such strong messaging out there, especially the last several years, call it 4 or 5 years, that companies, both public and private, should serve a social purpose. I mean, you see ESG is getting mentioned, environmental, social, and corporate governance getting mentioned all the time. And what's the beauty of Hologic, the magic is, I feel like we're the epitome of it. We're obviously incredibly purpose driven, and we have a highly engaged team that wakes up every day thinking about our mission and purpose and making a positive difference in the world, and really helping more women worldwide is our core, ESG focus. And our service organization lives into this every single day. It was fascinating. We did a study on our field engineers just to build out kind of a talent profile on who our best are, what makes them tick, and looking at things like the Gallup type things of strategic and execution and relationship and influencing. The key things we got back, some of our field engineers, when they finish a job, a lot of times you hear about, well, then I contact the good ones, right? Across service in general. I communicate with the customer. I let them know. I fill out my work order. Boom, boom, boom. R thinks about, hey, would I want my mom, my sister, my aunt to be to have her annual screening done on this machine? And it means something to them. And it just, you get goosebumps thinking about it, and our folks on the front line, and why we want to take care of them and listen to them and listen to their managers, because that's how they approach it. So you look at Hologic's mission as a company, some of the things you were talking about, and how we've, the epitome of, having a social purpose. Just a few things that I think about right now. I think about the Global Women's Health Index, and it's worth the Google for anyone listening. So it's our partnership with Gallup, which is the world's largest women's health survey, covers, I think, close to 95% of the world's population, ages 15 or older. And really, this could be our biggest and most impactful product. And it's not a product. We don't get revenue from it. We don't certainly drive awareness to certain things that could help Hologic's business. But this is, when you think of everything we've come out with over the years, and this being potentially our biggest product and the most impact we could have, keep in mind there's 3.9 billion women in the world. And we all know that women are at the cornerstone of healthy economies and healthy societies. So we listen to women directly from their voices about their health, not the men who run their countries and organizations. It's an annual survey that'll go for, I think, the next close to decade, 8 years. And it ranks every country and territory from best to worst. We have a strong presence at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And, what gets measured is going to get acted on. And we've really galvanized global, private, nonprofit, and government working together on this. And it's measuring not just things like breast cancer and cervical cancer, which are in our wheelhouse, but domestic violence, teenage pregnancy, education access, all these things. So it's not just Hologic related. So you think about that, and that's the investment that's gone into that, and the dollars that we've put behind that. It's a big deal to us, really, really meaningful. And things like that, and things like Project Health Equality for us where we work with partners to reduce healthcare disparities in underserved women nationwide. And you think of some of the stats, Black women are twice as likely to die from cervical cancer and 40% more likely to die from breast cancer than white women. Why is that? And what can we do to help drive that? Similar numbers with Hispanic women. So we've built Project Health Equality, which is an investment with us, and again, going back to the partners we work with, to drive access here to life-changing technology and that kind of global policy change for women's health to help improve early detection. So and we get to think about that every day in what we do. And you look, going back to nonprofit versus profit, the private sector, us being able to do that with profits is a big deal. And when you think about the service organization and what that means to us as we drive a more efficient, obviously patient care and uninterrupted for our customers and patients. But if we can drive better business top line and bottom line, and the resources that can be freed up, the cost avoidance there. So for us, we think about, hey, those are dollars above my pay grade on where they're spent. But if we can free up dollars that go towards obviously R&D, towards new game-changing technology, and then certainly things like this that Hologic's on Capitol Hill, drive. You think of where does the reimbursement come from and access to technology. We're driving a lot of that, and that takes resources and a strong group of talented people and groups to do that. So our service business has the ability to impact all of this by doing our jobs really well and providing incredible value to our customers and their patients. But going back to the dollars about it and what we contribute to that is important. So I think to answer your question, what's Hologic doing and what does it mean to us as the service organization kind of goes hand in hand.
Love it. For our audience, again, especially if you're a service leader, ESG is on every board agenda at the moment, and not just momentary. It is taken on a massive role, and your ability to understand it and articulate where and how your service organization can contribute to it, I think is one of those absolute enablers of that seat at the table we've been talking about. So a word from our sponsor. John Carroll wants to make sure I love it. He also says, shameless plug. The 2022 Voice of the Field Service Engineer Benchmark Survey launches next week. If you don't get it, please get in touch, and we'll hope you'll make the time to answer it, because there's some great insights that come from that survey that really benefit the community. By the way, did I see Mary J. Blige on your homepage?
Yeah, that's another example that I could have given right there. I was going a little long, but yeah, we did a Super Bowl commercial, and Mary J. is a spokesperson for us. She already was a spokesperson for us, and it's been really cool to see her involvement and her passion. Sheryl Crow is also a spokesman and has been for a long time now, several years. But yeah, with Mary J., the fact she was performing at halftime, and it was a chance for us to invest. And if you saw the commercial, it wasn't a plug for Hologic. It wasn't, certainly Hologic's name is at the end, but really driving, especially in post-COVID, getting women back to get to your annual screening. And that's one of the things that's scary for all of us to think about, how many women skipped their annual mammogram or their annual OB visit because of COVID and fear of COVID and lockdowns and what have you. So we really want to drive that. I mean, early detection and early intervention is what drives costs out of the healthcare system and certainly saves lives and impacts communities. So that was Hologic kind of, again, doing our part and driving. That was the whole message with Mary J., driving women for their annual Well Women exam. So
you brought up the pandemic, and it's regrettable that so many women, unfortunately, skipped a lot of those. Talk about from your service organization. Erik, are there some trends that you've observed in the last couple of years that you think are going to not only stay with us, but continue to have a big impact on the field service, customer experience space?
Yeah. Well, I think the obvious one that we've all been talking about, and even early in the first 6 months of it, was the need for businesses to support remote and home operations for our people. And conducting business via those channels, it requires more IT resources and infrastructure. and being able to keep pace there and allow with our customers, being able to interact differently with our customers and for them to be able to do more self-service. But I think going back to culture, the lack of the time of lack of face-to-face time for managers to be out with their teams being able to be together, it creates a barrier. And I think for us, when you think of it's opened my eyes on the importance of effective leadership. How can we still inspire? How can we communicate and to that whole workforce? And we've tried certain things. We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out, working on things like podcasts that we could do. But I think how do we communicate with that field engineer workforce when I think about, and obviously it was everybody was so impacted by the pandemic, but those folks never left the front lines. You look at what our diagnostics team did during COVID. We've shipped over 150 million COVID tests, which means obviously we've massively expanded that install base. The work that they did, the risk they put themselves at, continuing on the front lines, it has its effect mentally, not only with what they're dealing with at home and their kids being pulled from school and all those different things. So I think figuring out how do we continue to communicate, and going back to the things the business needs and is doing with service, how can we show that we're listening, and how, their world is so different than me sitting at my desk at our office in Boston or San Diego. So how do we listen? How do we communicate? How do we inspire? And all that to me is in the lack of the face-to-face, going back to that, being able to get with customers. I mean, we're still not allowed in a lot of facilities. It's just their rule. I've gotten denied at a meeting at Mayo Clinic just because it was a hard, fast rule of nobody unless it's a necessary worker to work on the equipment. So I think that hurts. That we got to find ways to get back to it, or be able to be more effective over Zoom and be able to walk through kind of the quarterly business reviews and what's happened in their facilities from a service standpoint.
Yeah, you're very consistent with a lot of leaders that I talk to, and their challenge on an ongoing basis, but it's really amplified every leader's empathy quotient, right? Really understanding, putting themselves in the shoes, in the day in the life of that field technician, and kind of what they go through and what they need. So for our final question, I've got to ask, Hologic has a lot of opportunity to work with research and advisory organizations in the space. You seem to have doubled down on Service Council. Why?
Yeah, I got to meet John. Like I said, going back to when I first got in, listening to a lot of different podcasts, networking. This service world, like any, is kind of a small world, and you get to know folks and see what others are doing and listen. I love the industry practitioner-led approach that Service Council has. The community of director and vice president level leaders, senior level audience. I love the event. The event in Chicago is one we always send our team to, and you get to see so much more. Being able to listen to CX leaders from whether it's Peloton or Southwest Airlines, things like that just get us out of our med tech bubble, if you will, to think outside the box and think bigger picture. It's really aimed at problem solving and diving into our operations and really influenced by other leaders. So I love working with the Service Council, and it's been a privilege to certainly be on this podcast today.
For our audience, if you missed it, you missed a good one. Erik Anderson is president of the Global Service Organization at Hologic. The event he was referring to is the Service Council Symposium. That's each, I think, September. Is going to be in Chicago this year. I attended last year, and as Erik mentioned, great gathering of practitioners, from executives to frontline contributors, with a common mission, common vision, which is really, how do we deliver world-class service? How do we improve efficiency, effectiveness of how we function as a service organization? So I would encourage you to check out servicecouncil.com. Again, on behalf of the Service Council team, thanks for joining us on this episode with Erik Anderson, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody.